When you start seeing like cars show up or toys,
Correct.
motorcycles, really nice stuff, and you look at your tax return and go, we make this much. Our house and lifestyle is this much. We go to the country club. Something's not added up. And that's the part where a lot of people just kind of like to put their blinders on. And
Years later, you don't have a passport.
yeah, you're like,
A lot of juicy stories.
Welcome to the Exit Strategy, your no bullshit guide to divorce with the experienced attorneys from New Direction Family Law. Unfiltered discussions to help you move from victim to victorious and from bitter to better.
Hi, everyone. It's Elizabeth Stevenson. I'm a partner with New Direction Family Law and my partner in crime.
Sarah Hink with New Direction Family Law. And thank you for joining us today. We have a guest, which is always great.
It is.
Hello, ladies.
Hello. Thanks for being here. Jason Deshayes, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, CEO of Cook Wealth, right?
that's me.
20 years of experience in financial advising and that sort of thing.
Yeah, oh yeah, a lot of tax work in there too and planning.
So we deal with that a lot, but we're not CPAs. So we love people like you that can help
Yeah, you can
us.
say, you do this part. I don't
Yeah.
want to do this part.
In fact, like a lot of our, separation agreements and even like court orders will say your attorney is not a CPA. So, don't take anything we say as tax advice because we don't know what we're talking about. So we always say, please go speak to your CPA about these questions. And we can give them general ideas, but I'm not an expert whatsoever.
That's right. So I want to start with when people are together, like they're married. And we were chatting about this a little bit before. How involved are people in tax preparation as a couple and knowing what's out there, even while they're still together, not even contemplating divorce?
So I tell you that at some point that was generational, where it was like the one spouse took care of everything. And that's who, as a CPA, we'd see the one spouse. Maybe the other one would just come and say hi, but for the most part, wasn't engaged in it. That's changed a little bit where now there's more division of responsibilities, but still, I'd say more often than not, there's the primary spouse and so that person is usually gathering the records. The other one will see the tax return. They'll sign off on it, but they don't necessarily spend a lot of time with their accountant or their financial advisor. They kind of like make that someone else's job.
Right.
And they say, that's my spouse's job, and that's what they do, and I do this part over here.
Right.
Yeah.
And so are they required? So can one person sign? I have a lot of times where the spouse goes, I didn't even sign on it. If it's a joint return, must they sign?
They both have to sign if it's a joint return. And unfortunately, what's kind of happens is again, I will see it, I will sign it. I don't know what it says. So they'll just, especially now with DocuSign, they'll just click away and then they're like, now it's done.
Right.
We're over with this. I would really encourage people when they're together is to actually take a little time to go through it. Now, I do this with my wife. She probably hates it. But every year I'm like, we're not going to do this innocent spouse thing. You're too smart to be an innocent spouse. I'm actually going to go through with her. And I go through and like, hey, this is what's here. This is a little different from last year. Here's where this comes from. She has questions every once in a while. I'll talk about some playing. And I would expect that with any client.
Right.
Generally what we do is we'll do a short video that's like on Loom and just says, this is the big things here. If you have any questions, please look at before you sign. There's nothing worse than them signing
And then
it gets released. And then say, by the way, 3 days later, I actually just now look at what's that number on the return.
Right.
Yeah.
But too many people don't take the time to just even 5 minutes to really understand what they're signing. Because once you're on it, you're jointly liable for that tax, whether you read it or not.
Correct.
And that's a little dangerous to be haphazard signing something legally.
Yeah. Sometimes that surprises us in separation and divorce. It's like, oh, there's a tax lien out there. Or, we owe a lot of taxes. I had no idea. And so am I responsible for that? And they're shocked that, well, yes, ma'am, or sir, you are.
Yeah.
And it will drag out a long time. We were talking about a story.
Right.
There was a situation where one of the spouses was at the time, made more money. The other spouse wasn't really working. And they filed jointly. And then now the tables have turned. They've been divorced, but that balance still kind of plagues her.
Right.
And if you have a large payment to the IRS and $50,000 more, they can take your passport. And so that's really scary that the government can just come in and take that away. And the government giveth you the passport and taketh it away.
Yeah.
Right.
But those are the kind of things that you just want to make sure you're on top of. And even if someone is really intelligent and you go, oh, they're very savvy financially.
Right.
That's almost where you definitely need to know so that you're not completely in a lurch if something happens, whether it's death or divorce, that now you have to be the one that has to do this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you should know. I mean, trust issues in every relationship if you're not talking about certain things, and finances is one of them.
People don't like to talk about finances
No.
at all.
No,
It's like a taboo in our society for some reason. I don't quite understand why.
I push prenups, and then, it's like 10% of my practice, maybe even less. No one really ever gets some. But that's the time to really start talking about it before you even get married and to understand taxes. I mean, there's some people out there who are married, and maybe it's more beneficial for them to actually file separate, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And like, what's some of those circumstances?
Everyone's a little different. It depends on, we're not a community property state. And
Right.
I came from New Mexico, which was a community property, still is a community property state. And that's where the filing separately gets a little wonky. Here it's a little clearer, but situations where perhaps one spouse makes significantly less than the other one does, or they make, even if they're equal earners, it may not, in their situation, like they don't itemize, they use all the basic stuff. Maybe that makes sense for them. So we look at, and a lot of CPAs have the software that will actually run the analysis. So you can say, hey, is it better to file separately? Especially if you're a physician, you're used to the income-based repayment rules. They always want to file separately because they want their resident salary, which is like $50,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Only pay their student loan on that part.
Right. Student loans is a huge part of that.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things, someone wants to be proactive in it, you can go online and you can get a transcript for your taxes every year. You can go to the IRS's website. You can create a login. It's id.me. And you can go on there and get transcripts of the income you make. You can get transcripts and account balances so you know exactly if you're on return, if there's any balances owed, and it's real clear. And then you can make the exercise that each spouse does that and kind of just has that as part of their family file, as it were. And if you have any questions like, well, what's this thing?
Right.
Then you can go, oh, what's that thing now, rather than when you go through discovery.
Oh, yikes.
Have that problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that'll show up in your credit report. Or will it? Does it?
No, the credit report will have like debts,
Right.
but they won't have any of the income items. They won't have like bank accounts or investment accounts.
Right.
That
But
spin off
if you
income.
owe taxes, will it show up on your?
It should if there was some sort of lien out.
Right, right.
So if the IRS put out a levy or on your bank account or a lien on your bank account, then that would show up in the
You don't want it to get that far.
No. Very hard to get the money back out from the IRS if you didn't know it.
So speaking of accounts, a lot of people, and I always tell people this, you need to have your own separate account. It doesn't have to be not in secret, but you got you want to have some cash of your own. And a lot of people have their own separate, then they have a joint account that they sort of put in and put in. But a lot of times people do not know what accounts are out there, and our job a lot of times is just going through one bank account and finding an account or looking on a pay stub and seeing where it's being direct deposited. What other tricks of the trade should people be looking for?
Yeah, that transcript's a good example of pulling what exists reported, like any income reported under your Social Security number. So you can at least say bank accounts, investment accounts. It's difficult because if something just is like a wad of cash in a non-interest bearing account, it's not going to show up anywhere.
Right.
But it's being aware of like looking at the check stubs, looking at bank statements and seeing where money is transferring left and right. Because you'll see that like, oh, $5,000 went somewhere.
Right.
Well, wait, I don't remember $5,000 coming into these different accounts. So that's the kind of stuff you have to look into and just be aware. My wife handles a lot of our finances, but she does in a way like I still have full transparency in everything. So I can go in and I look at stuff, just go, oh yeah, that's right. These things happened. And she handles the day to day, like where it all gets budgeted and everything.
Right.
But that's where there's like a division of responsibility, but still an accountability to know where that number is.
Right.
Yeah, and I think generational, it's changing a little bit with the separate accounts. Like my generation, a lot of people have those separate accounts and maintain them throughout the marriage. And, talking to my friends, a lot of them file separate, married, because of the student loan situation. So I think, a generational, it is changing. But it is really important still to have those conversations and to know what's out there and, look at the tax returns. And if you're filing jointly, you're going to see like the interest on these accounts. So like, okay, that exists. It's out there somewhere.
Well, it is better than before when we didn't have interest on bank accounts because you could have lots of money and it still didn't produce enough interest. Now actually things spin enough interest that those accounts are probably productive again. So pop up on the transcripts now.
Well, that's true.
So now we get to pay taxes on them again.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, the government give us, the government take
Take
it
it away.
Yes, for sure. And then when you come to the part where you are separating and mean, are there any conflicts for couples reaching out to you, both of them asking for information about their past taxes? I've had issues before where the accountant doesn't want to speak to one party, that they were technically employed by the other, but they're married and you're filing taxes together.
So there are real strict conflict of interest guidelines in the CPA world. You have to identify those conflicts, and when someone's starting to get divorced, you have to then get everyone to either waive the conflict or someone has to say, you're my CPA and you're now not so-and-so's CPA. So that's when they get separate representation.
Can they still stay within the firm? Like ours can...
Yes.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
yes
That's
and
what I
no.
mean, but no.
Yes and no. They can stay within the firm, but they still have to acknowledge the conflict.
Right, right,
Because
right.
they can say, well, yeah, so-and-so represents me, but technically the firm both employs them. So I think that when people are looking at that, it gets into okay, maybe the best thing is you get two different people.
Right.
Yeah.
And
right.
so then the kind of joint responsibility or the joint return was this accountant, and then now you have your own separate ones. None of them have history with you, but they also don't have a conflict from before,
Right,
saying, well,
right,
you were
right.
really my client because you were the business owner that made the money.
Right.
Yeah.
And your wife or ex-wife is not really my client. I never saw her anyway. So I kind of think just go start fresh.
Yeah.
It's kind of a good time for that.
Can you share documents with the
Yeah,
new
it-
CPA?
As long as anyone, usually just requires a sign-off
Gotcha.
process where you say, yeah, I disclose, you're allowed to disclose the information on my behalf, or they'll send you the records, and the records go,
Gotcha.
you go from you to your attorney or your accountant.
Right,
So
right.
usually, as long as you're being amicable and professional, the CPAs are happy to work with each
Who are
other.
those people?
They're not in the, they did that, 10 years ago
Right.
kind of business, but
Right.
you can work well together still. Sometimes people have a really amicable divorce and they still use the same firm
But,
because they're
right.
like,
I've had that.
I don't care that they're doing their life. This is fine. They're
Yeah.
doing this one. It's just kind of, I don't know. I'd prefer, I think if that would happen to me, I'd be like, yeah, let's go get a clean
Yeah.
slate. No matter how good the relationship
think
is,
I
I
would
just need a
too.
clean break.
Yeah.
But in North Carolina, you have the year-long separation before you get, you know, the divorce judgment. So within that time frame, a lot of people are filing taxes, and they've been separated for 6 months already.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's beneficial to file jointly still. So, I mean, in that case, they're going to use the same CPA.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard to do. I'm not sure how you would do a joint return with two different CPAs unless you had someone review it ahead of time or before you filed. And I think that's where the situation is. We have to do this like one last hurrah. Let's just
right.
make it work for us, and usually does work out better.
Right.
So you just have to make sure you're gonna be nice to each other just for that part, and then sign it. Sometimes they'll want to see the analysis both ways, though. So they'll say, "Okay,
Right.
file it. We think filing joint, but prove me to me that it's not better to file separately."
Right.
Right.
And if they file separately, then
Right. And then we'll put that in our separation agreements or things about how they're going to file taxes and, what's going to be more beneficial, who's going to pay what tax if tax is owed.
And if there's a house sold, who's doing the capital gains on their
Gains, yeah.
taxes, all of those.
I will say I am always surprised at the number of divorce decrees I've seen that have never been looked at before by any sort of accountant or advisor, financial person, because they're like, well, this is what it is. And they just kind of hand it to you. I'm like, why did you do this way? And I don't know. That's what they suggested. I'm like, well, yeah, that's why, because it's terrible for you. But it's one of those, there's a lot of stuff in there. And there's, back when there was dependency exemptions, but like who can claim credits for the kids?
Right.
Yeah.
Who's
Right,
going to
right.
claim credits for future education, for college students? Who gets the house? Who's going to be
Right,
entitled to
right,
those things? Do you get the retirement account or do you get the brokerage
Right,
account?
right.
And those are all, they could be dollar for dollar equal. But if I was the spouse that's going to get a bunch of assets and I got the choice between a $500,000 brokerage account or a $500,000 IRA, I'd definitely take the brokerage account.
Right. And that was going to be my next question. So why is that?
Well, so depending on how old you are, that IRA is going to be maybe too early, right? So if you're
Right.
45, that IRA is going to be hard to get to without paying an extra penalty on top of the tax.
Right.
The brokerage account has no restrictions on when you can take out time-wise. You may end up with different capital gains treatment or different kind of income treatment based on how it's invested, but generally it's going to be a much more tax-favorable account, a lot more flexibility, especially if you go buy a house,
Right.
reset your life up. That's money you can get to. Now, if you're 65 and getting that out is less of an issue, but still every dollar that comes out of a traditional IRA or retirement plan that's not a Roth tends to be taxable, which then that can add up pretty quick.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think it depends on how old, is that what you say, what your age is? Like,
Yeah, 59 and a half is the magic
Right,
number when
right.
you lose the penalty then.
because we see a lot of, people call it the grain of divorce, where people are already retired, and so they've been living on one retirement on that. Now two got to live on one, and it makes it really difficult and challenging for people.
And then you got to think about things like Social Security, like how long were you married for, and then that was like Johnny Carson example where he had 3 different ex-wives claiming half of his benefits, so they're paying out like 2.5 times what he should have.
Right.
But those are the kind of things you got to coordinate and just know about. With children, it's the dependency and how much time, like is it majority of the time. Those are all the kind of things we look at, and just making sure you understand what you're getting into, and especially if you're the spouse that would say is not the primary earner,
Right.
or the less financially sophisticated spouse. They just get stuff and they're like, I don't know what to do with this.
it.
I don't know how to. I've never had to take money out of this thing. We've just had money,
Right,
and
right.
They just get really confused on how to do it, and it's now, do they have to have that stretch longer than they think?
Hey guys, it's Jen with New Direction Family Law. Let's face it, divorce affects a lot of people, myself included. I've been there. There's no easy way around it. It just sucks. But determining the finances of one household, splitting into 2, can be one of the most stressful issues of divorce. Will alimony or child support have to be paid? Who gets the house and the cars? Who has to pay all the credit card debt or any other debt? Do I get to keep all of my retirement? These are all important questions that you need answered going into a divorce. And it's so important that you're represented by an experienced family law attorney that can answer these questions for you and help you develop a plan specifically for you and your situation to move forward. New Direction Family Law has over 30 years experience protecting the rights of our clients when going through divorce. We aggressively advocate, support, and educate our clients to achieve the best possible outcomes. So give us a call today to schedule an initial consultation at 919-719-3470 or reach out to us via our website at newdirectionfamilylaw.com.
Well, I always try to send people to a financial advisor or something, because we'll get all the documents and we'll do a spreadsheet, and we'll do it like, here's what we think is in your best interest. And like you say, they're getting $500,000. They don't know what to do with it. I mean, should I invest it?
Hopefully they're getting $500,000. Not everybody.
Well, listen, even $100,000, and then we're gonna have to sell the house, and I'll have $250,000 plus this $100,000. So can someone come and sit down with you and say, here's what my attorney and I have talked about how to divide our assets, and can you help them understand, or say, I wouldn't do that, I would do this instead?
Yeah, we're a little unique because we're both a tax planning practice and the wealth management practice and financial planning. So we've got all that there, so we can look at the long haul saying, hey, for you as a person in your financial plan, this makes sense.
Right.
For your tax immediately in the long term, this makes sense or doesn't make sense. And we do that with clients all the time. And it's also good because a lot of times we don't have that relationship if they're coming fresh and they need a fresh set of eyes. So it's really a kind of like a fresh look at your overall finances anyway, to make sure that you're being set up correctly.
Right.
Yeah, because that comes down to a lot of cases. Is cash in hand better for you, or do you want some more of the retirement funds to keep in there? And a lot of people don't know. They haven't even thought about it.
No, it's just, I mean, number, like, we're worth $5 million. I want 2.5, like, or whatever the number is.
That's not how this works. But especially if you're like 30, 35, you're not thinking about retirement. I mean, I've always heard cash is king. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I mean,
cash is flexible, right? It's fungible. You can use it for different reasons, purposes, and everything. But it also depends if you're working or not. So if you've got the situation where you were like dinks, double income, no kids, and you're both working, it's a little different than say, oh, I was the non-working spouse that stayed at home. I need to live on child support or whatever, spousal agreement there is, but I haven't worked in a long time. What do I do with myself now? I can't rely on my ex's Social Security and all that stuff.
Right. Were you here when alimony was taxable?
Oh yeah, yeah.
That was always fun.
That was always one of the. I was kind of surprised the president who specifically changed that, given the number of ex-spouses he has. But it was cleaner a little bit because it was like, yeah, you get paid, you get deduction. There was a balance there.
Right.
And now it's just like,
Now the guy
get
who's
anything.
paying doesn't get
Yeah.
gets no benefit whatsoever
Well,
out
and
of
some of
that.
those, alimony payments are pretty substantial.
Yeah, they
You're
can
going,
be.
That just poof goes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
makes it, the tax part of divorce becomes really wonky then because you're out cash and you still have to pay tax as now a single person,
Right.
which is a lot more. And so you go, okay, well, I used to have cash flow wise from a day-to-day purpose. Well, before I even get anything from my personal lifestyle, I've now written off
That's right.
a
There's a
chunk
check.
that goes to,
That's right.
there's a check that goes to the ex-spouse, my tax bill's higher, and now I only have this much to live on. That makes it really hard. And you're going, I was thinking about buying a house. Instead, now I'm going to get a one-bedroom apartment
Correct.
in a not-so-nice part of town because that's all I can afford.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So what happens with I get to ask this question too. So it's alimony. What happens with alimony on your taxes that's paid to you?
Now, nothing. Now
Nothing,
now
right?
it just
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't
It's
even
just
get
like free
reported.
money
It's
to
just
you,
free
right?
cash. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That seems so unfair to me.
That was such a hard pill to swallow for a lot
swallow.
of people when it made that change. Before you could at least say, well, hey, she'll
tax
the
benefit.
receiving person will pay the the taxes on that, and you can kind of negotiate a little bit easier.
Right.
When
now not so
not so
much.
Yeah.
much. But now we just don't mention it. It's like it never happened because what's the point? It just makes people upset.
it makes it real hard to negotiate when you're like,
Yeah.
you lose either way.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So what else should people getting divorced or thinking about separation do as a pre-planning stage?
I would look at all the stuff you do know about, bank accounts, credit cards, retirement accounts, and figure out how they're titled and who the beneficiaries are. I have seen many times where the ex-spouse is still on a retirement plan, so they kept working at whatever place for the next 10 years, and they never updated their beneficiary to a family member, their children. I mean, the children may be in the contingent beneficiary, but
Right.
the ex-spouse is still the primary. And that overrules a lot of things. So you
Right.
need to make sure you do a kind of a clean house, like
Yeah.
I do.
post-mortem. And, okay, if this is happening, we got to change
Right.
beneficiaries across the board, life insurance policies, and
Right.
all that stuff, and just make sure that doesn't get forgotten about because it's not top of mind to go update your corporate benefits and such. But it's important to do it.
And there's some that won't let you do it unless you're divorced, and some will let you do it. Like I had to put a stop to the mediation because he had changed all the beneficiaries, and not told anyone. And it just seemed so, I don't know, not in good faith. sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Typically, if you change your beneficiary from your spouse, the spouse has to consent.
That's
and,
usually what I thought.
notarize it.
Right,
and
right.
everything.
That's why
Right.
we include that language in separation
Separation
agreements
agreements. Right.
to put in their waiver
Right.
of any of those.
Or you can't
spousal
change it as
benefits.
long as
Yeah.
you're paying alimony or child support. You're going to keep
Yeah.
me as the
Right.
beneficiary. kind of
So
thing.
there's that. There's also making sure the accounts are titled right. So if it's in a trust or if it's in your name or joint names, that all that gets cleaned up. So there's not some leftover expectation of you still own that or you still own that debt, so you can pay it for it.
Right,
And-
because a lot of people are putting like their houses and things in a like a family trust just for tax benefit purposes, and they don't think about that, and it gets kind of tricky sometimes.
Yeah, it's just making sure you know who owns what.
What, right.
And I always, it's kind of fun to read the divorce decrees and seeing these are the assets that so and so owns. It's like, okay, you want to make sure that lines up, and then afterwards that there's the other person is nowhere on it unless it's required to.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So what? I always think of CPAs, and don't take this the wrong way. But
I won't. I
mean,
think I
think
know
about
where you're
it.
going with this.
we have a lot of juicy stories.
Yeah, but think about what people say about us. Like, we don't take it seriously.
So I mean, if somebody comes to you, and it's really not on that topic, but let's say they don't have a lot of money, they only got like $50,000. A lot of people don't feel like they need a financial advisor. Oh, I don't have enough money to go see somebody. Is there a threshold, or what would you say to that?
Every firm's a little different. So like some firms, it's lower because
Right.
of their fee structure, their staff structure, and sometimes they don't have minimums at all. So if you go to one of those retail branches of like a Schwab or a Edward Jones, they usually have minimal minimums or nothing.
Okay.
And so you may be able to talk with someone once a year and all's good. Generally, if you're going to go into someone who's more in financial planners like we are, they're going to have higher minimums because to do the work they do,
Right.
you have to have something to work with.
Right.
Otherwise, it's the fee to them is too low and it's too high for you and doesn't make
Right,
sense.
right.
It's like our fees, approximately $500,000 is with the kind of management we want to work with. we'll always make exceptions if that's the right case, but
Right.
we also don't do our best work for someone who has $50,000 because generally at that point it's like just keep the course, like,
Right,
keep
right,
invested, make these things, and then move on. But it's not. We don't want to tell someone like, oh, we got to do this crazy financial plan for you. If you have $50,000
Right.
and you make $75,000 a year, there's not a lot of planning other than just good habits you just need to keep doing.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's huge, just having those good habits. Because, like you said before, there's a lot of stay-at-home mothers who come out of a separation and divorce, and they are getting retirement accounts, part of it, but it's still only like $100,000. And at that time, I tell them, you have no retirement otherwise. Like, if you can keep that
Keep
there,
that. Right.
and that's why we try to form their decree or whatever the agreement is on separating those assets and something that they can have savings, retirement, and some kind of cash
Right.
flow, and just figuring out that balance until you get back on your feet, which is going to take a couple of years for sure.
At least.
But
yeah.
I mean, there's women and men who come out of these relationships and they've been the stay-at-home parent, and they only have in their head like 10 more years left of work,
I
and like
know.
re-entering the workforce in their mid 40s, late 40s. And they have nothing. So it's really hard. So if you're listening out there and you don't meet the threshold for financial planning, like go get some information. There's information online. I'm sure
Right.
your website has information, and just become knowledgeable about the differences in retirement and cash and how to do the investments, and what to get a new car, what interest rate, and like think about that.
Yeah.
And maybe I need a used car
Yeah,
with
exactly.
as little miles as I can find for $20,000, and not have that car payment would be more beneficial to you. And take the time to learn that.
And there's so many situations where someone didn't care for their spouse in that way, like before they died or got divorced. So it was just, it's hard to see people who are like, you should be able to retire soon, but you can't.
Can't.
Because
Yeah.
your
Exactly.
spouse died, your spouse got divorced and left you with a bad
Right,
deal, and
right.
you've now been dealt a bad hand. That's hard to see. And there's not a lot to do to
There's
fix
nothing
it
you can
beyond
really
just
do.
work harder. And
Right.
retirement looks different now than before, and may not happen as soon as you'd like it
Yeah.
to.
Right.
But you just have to kind of make do with what you've got, and especially if you're the stay-at-home spouse and your spouse made a lot of money. Saw this years and years ago with a dentist and his wife, who they were married for 12 years, and he made great money. She did not.
Right.
And she didn't work for most of that time. And so now what is she going to do? She didn't have a high earning career beforehand, so she
Right.
can't go back to that. She
Right.
was like a school teacher.
Right.
And so there's only so much you can do when those are the situations. You either got to change your life and get a new career path and do something different. But that's not good. That's not going to be easy.
No,
But it's going to
it's
be what
not.
you have to do.
Be stressful.
Yeah, and we work with a lot of closely held businesses. And I'll take, for example, like a dentist office or a doctor's office. Generally, a lot of times the wife was the
Practice manager.
Exactly. So now we got to divide the business. The husband gets the business, and so she really is out of a job and has no marketable skills. So it gets a little tricky.
And then
when
other
you do
people are
that.
surprised when they think their spouse makes a lot of money, but to come to find out that it's not really
Really
there.
there.
And it's like, well, wait a second. I thought he made like $200,000 a year, and maybe he does, but it's gone.
Where'd it
and there's a
go?
bunch of
Right.
debt. Like, how did that happen? Well, you should have asked that question a while ago.
When you start seeing cars show up or toys,
Correct.
motorcycles, really nice stuff, and you look at your tax return and go, we make this much. Our house and lifestyle is this much. We go to the country club. Something's not added up because this
Yeah.
Right.
costs money and there's not enough of it. And that's the part where a lot of people just kind of like to put their blinders on and live
Right.
their
Sometimes
life.
it's better. It's like you don't want to know. What you don't know will hurt you.
Yeah. Well, here,
Which is
well,
not true.
Yeah.
And then years later, you don't have a passport.
Yeah. You're like, man, I hope they enjoyed that country club experience because
Really?
that was the best
Yeah.
time I was going
And
to
that's
have.
the best I've
It's
ever
like
had.
$5 in your savings account. Okay, you get $2.50. He gets $2.50.
We're going to split that, get the quarter,
Yeah.
get the quarters out and put them on the table.
Yeah.
So what services does Cook Wealth Management? What do you guys provide?
So we do tax planning and preparation. That's the tax side of the business. And so
Okay.
that's really coaching people how to handle their money well, pay their taxes
Right.
right, but not be overly aggressive, also not miss things when they could plan better. The bulk of our business is on the financial planning side, where
Okay.
we take an integrated approach where we do incorporate tax planning into that approach because it's a huge part of every investment decision, every financial decision. And then we have an ongoing service calendar. So we talk with our clients on a regular basis. We're not just like, hey, see you once a year. We'll hit the rebalance button. We want to build the relationship, understand your kids, understand your intentions in life, because that's the part where, hey, I'd rather have a client for 20 years and know that we helped them navigate that or not, and then just see that success in that and see it in the next generation. And we've seen that with a lot of our clients. We're like now seeing the adult children having their life set up and go, okay, mom helped them with this, and then they did this next. It's really cool to see that kind of long term.
That's great to see it come full circle like that. That's awesome.
We have one family. I think we have 3 generations of the family. We have one. We're waiting for one of the grandkids to have the one kid, and we can say we have 4. But it's really neat to see kind of how those family legacies play out. And it doesn't have to be someone who's like insanely wealthy either. Someone could have $1 million, and that is a lot of money, but it's not what I would say like crazy wealth. It's not big money where you don't have to worry about what's happening tomorrow. It's enough to say, hey, I want to make sure that my kids understand how I lived, how I gave money away, how I want them to kind of see that, and you can help translate that so that those kids and those other generations learn from that. Or in situations like we've been talking about, like help people through those hard times where, we got them out of this divorce, we got them through the divorce and helped them through it, and they became better for it afterwards because I mean, your guys' podcast, you go from bitter to better, right? So you want to help navigate them in that direction so it moves positively. You don't want people feeling like, I'm every time I sign this tax return or look at my financial plan, I'm just pissed. No one
or I don't want to know because I'm scared.
There's definitely times we've had conversations with clients where they go, oh, when I have this done, I get her off that thing, I'm going to be so happy. I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want our clients to have to. I want them to say, okay, we made a plan, we moved forward, and we did well.
So if you're out there listening and you want information, you check them out online. And of course, like whether you're single, in your next relationship, talk about your finances, talk about taxes, and seek out professional help because it is worth it for sure.
I agree. How can people get in touch with you guys?
They can go to our website, cookwealth.com, or they can call our office, 919-784-9100.
And I'm assuming y'all do things virtually. We don't have to come in person. Make it easy.
Man, I got local people I still see. I haven't physically met some of them thanks to COVID. Yeah, we can service people nationally, locally, whatever works for folks.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me,
I've
ladies.
learned a lot.
And there's still so much to learn.
I know.
I know. Yeah, if you don't do it, you've got to learn it.
I agree.
So ain't that some shit?
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review. You can visit us at newdirectionfamilylaw.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at the exitstrategy_podcast or email us at exitstrategy@newdirectionfamilylaw.com. We'll be back next time with more no bullshit content about life, divorce, parenting, relationships, and everything in between.